Okay, now we start for real. Clement, it's an absolute honor to have you. Thanks for taking the time to sit down with me. As I was just saying to you, I'm a huge fan of your work. It's a rather strange thing to see someone so good at hand drawing with pencil in this day and age, let alone to see someone who I believe similar in age to me. As you can imagine, when I saw your work on Instagram, that's where I first got to see your work. I was surprised, shocked, and amazed by how incredible your drawings are and how long they probably take you. But we'll try to understand all of that today. Before I ask you to just sort of introduce yourself shortly, I'll just say the whole point of today's session is to be able to inspire and excite some students or young professionals who might be watching this, and to give them a little bit of insight into your work process and your drawing process, to kind of give them an idea of what goes on in your head when you're coming up with these concepts and how you execute such incredible drawings. So Clement, before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of a brief introduction to perhaps your education and your experience.
Well, thank you so much, Hamza. It's really an honor to be talking with you as well. And thank you for having me. I started off, I was born and raised in France, and then I kind of spent most of my life here in France. But then I did my B.Arch, my Bachelor's of Architecture at the University of Nottingham in the UK. And then I also did my master's at the Bartlett. I guess even though I was born and raised in France, I kind of moved towards architectural education in the UK. I love it.
Didn't you actually work at Bernard Tschumi Architects?
Yeah, that's right. So after my bachelor's, I was lucky enough to go and work for Bernard Tschumi Architects in the New York office for a year. And then a year after that, I worked at a small firm in Geneva in Switzerland.
That's amazing. So, I mean, that's quite a practice to have on your resume as well. What was it like working there?
So working at Bernard Tschumi's, kind of starstruck, of course, meeting Bernard and the whole team. We were only 8 at the time, so it was quite a close-knit team. And kind of having the experience as well of working in a kind of small, close-knit team was invaluable, learning, how the competition system works, working on built projects under construction as well. And then coming back to Geneva and then working at a small firm there as well, kind of gave a different edge to what architectural education had to offer in the first place. So I think it's a good balance to be in kind of academia and kind of work placement as well.
I mean, there's so many kind of tangents I could probably take that conversation, because we could probably do a whole session about what it's like to work at Bernard Tschumi Architects. But I think the focus for today is as it has been in the previous episodes, is to just make sure we try to extract as much useful information as we can from you, and really get into your drawings and try to understand how you create what you create. So just before we get into seeing, your drawings, when did you actually get onto Instagram, and what made you want to sort of get onto Instagram in the first place?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Hamza. I think after I finished my master's, that was when I kind of I had the account for some time before that, but I never actually filled it up with any of my works. And I think after the master's, it was a time of kind of thinking about what it was I actually was doing with these drawings. So Instagram kind of became this platform where I was able to luckily share my drawings, the process drawings, and also kind of just drawings that sketches. So it kind of became a small portfolio in itself in a ways, and kind of documenting the process of drawing. And until now, it's kind of been this continuous kind of archive of the stuff that I have been drawing.
It's amazing. And there's been a lot of conversation about Instagram being almost a pastiche thing to sort of, be on Instagram and produce drawings for Instagram. But what's your thoughts on the idea of, I mean, you probably don't do this, but what's your kind of view on producing drawings specifically for Instagram and kind of building this kind of brand as opposed to kind of producing your drawings for practice or for academia?
Yeah, I think kind of Instagram is a world where both can coexist. At the same time, it is for brand building, whoever you are as a person, for your own artistic development, and the representation of yourself. But at the same time, some people use it just for, like I said, like an archive. So then, you know, it's almost like pulling out your drawer and looking back at your old drawings in a way. So it's kind of a bit of both, I guess. And in terms of the people who create their drawings for Instagram, I don't know. It's to each their own, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, look, your drawings are there's something. As I said, I think your drawings stand out for many reasons, but one of the main reasons is because it's all hand drawn with a bloody pencil, and it's such a rare thing to find nowadays. Someone doing kind of pencil drawings in architecture, and not just technical drawings. These are phenomenological, artistic, deep kind of. These are such incredible drawings. I've never seen this caliber of drawings before. You can tell I'm being a bit of a fanboy right now. But even the way you're using the eraser and kind of taking lines away, and it's not just the actual lines themselves, but it's the absence of lines and mark making, which it fascinates me. So I'm really looking forward to getting into these drawings. Would you mind sort of sharing your slides now?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, just take us through kind of, your process, your ideas, your inspirations. Tell us how long you take on these drawings and how you're inspired to do such drawings.
Right. I just like to take you through 4 different drawings to kind of give you an overview in terms of the kind of the process, the technique, maybe some of the inspirations that kind of inspired some of the drawings. And I'd kind of like to talk to you about not so much the projects themselves, but more about where the drawing was used and kind of where they weren't used, or how different modes of kind of representation took place and how that fed into the drawing. So so it's 4 different drawings. The first one kind of explores, so apartment number 5, that was for the Bartlett for my final year project, and also I submitted that for the Architectural Drawing Prize. And that's kind of like an exploratory, experimental, spatial memory flashbacks drawing. Then Pavilions for Conversations, that was a project that I did also at the Bartlett the year before. And that was more of kind of an iterative design, kind of more linked to architecture and spaces in the conventional manner. Number 3 is Sohn's Lost Room, and that's just a project that, kind of a smaller project that talks about narrative and storytelling, and it's the same for number 4, which is Memory Palace, which is a bit of a spin-off from the apartment number 5 drawings, and that also deals with this idea of narrative and memory. But I think what's different about that drawing in particular is that it's more of a kind of a drawing that's done over a long period of time. So just to move on with the first one. So for the apartment number 5 drawing, it's just to give you a bit of background on it. It started off about February or March 2020, right before the lockdown. And then it was about this idea of trying to spatialize these memories of a trip that I recently went to India in Ahmedabad, where we visited architecture works by Le Corbusier, Louis Kahn, Doshi. And then suddenly being in the lockdown kind of had me yearning to re-experience those places again. So then drawing came at an early stage of that project, kind of as sketches or as diagrams that were done on site in Ahmedabad when visiting these masterpieces.
And sorry to interrupt you, this is part of your part 1 or part 2?
Part 2. So this was my final year, my 5th year at the Bartlett. It's kind of the summative project for this one.
What an amazing trip you guys got to go on.
Absolutely, and I think it was absolute luck. I mean, given the circumstances of actually being able to visit such an incredible place, right before the pandemic hit. So that's why kind of this notion of yearning to re-experience those places was even stronger, because yes, it's just the situations was just, yeah. So
Can I be annoying and just say,
sure.
if you go back to that sketch that you had,
This one.
yeah, would you be able to zoom in?
Let's see if I can.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Oh, because I really want to get into this, because from the previous episodes as well of this, my passion is to see where the concept comes from and derives from, and what's going through your head. Because what a lot of the audience will be really passionate about here is how they can kind of improve their design thinking through drawing. And I mean, even if you zoom in a little bit more, if possible, I'm trying to get really deep in here. Talk to us a little bit more about this sketch, this preliminary sketch. What is it, and where did it come from?
Yeah, sure, Hamza. So it was in the mill owners, designed by Le Corbusier, and it was this great big atrium space, in that building. And kind of what really struck me was just the volume of it. So just part of practicing and understanding how, and in terms of composition, but also in terms of proportion, how that also affects the spatial kind of understanding of the space atmospherically and compositionally. So it's a very tentative and quick sketch of just trying to understand that, rather than trying to understand, how it's constructed or anything. I was more interested in just the proportionality, of that particular space.
Wow, so it seems quite abstract to me. It seems like a kind of snippet, a crop drawing. Yeah, what exactly are you looking at when you're drawing this?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, how do you say, abstract, I guess, or just trying to, I suppose, condense the main features of what I'm looking at. So then it's this great big curving wall here, which then just, there's actually a small passage here, which, and these are the brise-soleil of the building. So then there was this idea of this space that vanishes right at the cusp of that, of where the wall just happens to curve in. So I was really interested in that aspect of it, but also, granted, it's not so much about the scale here, but just the immensity of the wall was something that I also that kind of gravitated towards, and a reason why I sketched this in the first place.
Amazing. And so this developed into perhaps a more refined sketch, or you were kind of recording through photographs, as I saw?
Yeah, I mean, it was more of a rough sketch. We weren't really allowed to take photographs there, so that's why I just, instinctively just picked up the pencil and kind of, it was more about recording the feeling and the proportionality of that space. Yeah.
So can we zoom into this one and we do the same thing?
Yeah, so then this one, this required a bit more thought, because this was Le Corbusier Sanskar Kendra Museum in Ahmedabad, and it was this great big atrium space. And I was trying to understand, here is actually the outline of the pool that was in there. And I was interested in seeing, because what he did quite interestingly is not to frame the pool at the center of this atrium. This is actually a void. But he let some of the forms, some of the pool just, enter in this kind of the covered area, which is here. So it's something that kind of defies, I suppose, what was or my expectations of how to kind of frame a particular object, and then seeing something offset, but not only offset, but also had this personality to it, was interesting to me. So then it was this idea of the square juxtaposed with this funny shape, and I thought it was interesting, not only in kind of seeing it in perspective, as I took photographs of it, but also in plan. as we're so accustomed to viewing as architects and architecture students.
Wow. So what's already standing out to me is that, you've only showed me two preliminary sketches, and I'm already seeing there's a level of abstractness here, which it's not conforming to traditional architectural kind of constraints or architectural kind of, you know, drawing standards or language. It is very much an artistic mark making exercise. What are we actually looking at here now? Is this a kind of almost a sectional diagrammatic study, or is it a plan diagram?
Yeah, so then it's a plan. Um, yeah, just a plan.
And this is what I love doing these things as well. But looking at the way you do it is opening up my eyes to kind of a new style. But even these kind of marks that you're making, the plus, the little black squares, the squiggly lines in the middle marking an X, these are these are symbols from your own making, right?
Right, and I think it's interesting to kind of observe how other architects and other architecture students just try and condense the idea or the essence of a space into their own mark making. So then for me, because it was the pluses are actually the columns, so then there was a grid structure there, and then this funny shape was the outline of the pool, and then the dotted lines kind of talked about this idea of continuing a line or a line of sight or so on. So it's a kind of sketching and this kind of quick exercise, especially on site, is you can see the personality of the architect or the person sketching in that.
Definitely, yeah. Amazing.
So then from the project, from this idea of flashbacks, so then I had the chance to take photographs during my trip. And then this is a particular hallway in Louis Kahn's Omnibod. And then this is a photograph of my corridor in the apartment in which I was staying in. And then this next photo is a photo of the Louis Kahn corridor, which also resembled the keyhole of the door. So then this idea of spatial flashbacks was quite interesting to me, and I tried to kind of, that's where the germ of the idea for apartment number 5 drawing came from, was these flashbacks. And it's exactly the same here, a sun ray passing through the apartment in London. And then these photos taken in Le Corbusier's Mill Owners. So I snuck these photos in. But kind of this idea of flashbacks and how spatially, but also atmospherically, you almost seem to be two places at once. And then I continued that exercise of trying to map out exactly where these flashbacks happen within the apartment, just as a way of, because this is, I suppose, another way of drawing. It's collage, murals, etc. So then trying to understand and give rationality and rigor to how the drawing would then be set out in terms of where kind of the memory happens and where the real space of the apartment happens. So it's kind of an experimental, exploratory, and hybrid way of working through the drawing. Same thing here. This is just a plan of the apartment, kind of reconstructed through photographs. And as any architecture student, we try to look at the precedents. And in my case, I was looking at the plans of the spaces that I had visited. So then Louis Kahn's corridor, which is here in the IIM, or Doshi Sangath, which also reappears in the drawing, or Le Corbusier's mill owner, Sanskar Kendra museum. So it kind of took an abstraction to a different level of understanding the real space of the memory, the real space of the apartment versus the scale and context of the other buildings at a different scales.
It's fascinating stuff here. I have to quickly ask as well, how did you take the photographs of the top-down view of the room?
Oh, this one. So it's literally just took a tripod and my camera and then went through every, I don't know, half meter and just took a photograph and then added them and spliced them. So it's kind of this visual journey through the apartment with just through photographs, really.
So you're literally just standing with the camera up, with your arms up as high as you can.
That's totally right. Yeah, absolutely.
It's an amazing effect.
Thanks.
So I see we've come to another really interesting sketch here. Could we zoom in?
Yeah.
Please tell us about it.
So this is, if you so it's kind of sideways, but if you remember the keyhole here, and then I was interested in this idea of at what scale would it feel like, as if I'm looking through Khan's corridor. So then this idea of scaling also became important to the project, in the sense of what scale is a memory. And if I were to recreate this in kind of at a particular scale, then the effect of looking through the keyhole also visually does look like I'm standing in Louis Kahn's corridor. So it's kind of another way of using drawing. It's not just quick sketches, but also trying to understand kind of systematically what different spaces are needed, and in terms of the proportionality and scale. So this is I suppose another way of using the drawing.
One of the things I've realized through my own journey of kind of architectural practice and education and just pondering is the importance of thinking through drawing. And that's why I always start to drool a bit when I see people's sketchbooks who do it well. And, you know, what I'm looking at right now is an amazing example of this, which is you might have these kind of fragmented ideas in your head. You might be trying to piece together a concept in your head, but it's always best to try and put those things on paper and try to look at them from a visual perspective, you know, because the way in which your brain can recreate and reassemble and kind of reconfigure those concepts into something more coherent is more advanced than any software or any, you know, any line of kind of sedentary thinking could give you. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, absolutely. I think drawing to represent something is one thing, but I think drawing as an act of exploration is totally much more enriching than perhaps using any other thing. But because it's so kind of, how do you say, fast twitch, it's just so kind of fast thinking through. And with every mark you make, you know, it's this translation from something that's intangible in your head to something that is then tangible on the paper. So it's, you know, as Cartier-Bresson talks about the camera being the extension of your eye, the pencil is the extension to you know, the architect's hand, or anyone who draws, I suppose. And in many ways, I totally agree that sometimes the process work looks even more interesting than the final piece of work, if there is a final piece of work. So it's drawing as a tool of exploration is something that we should keep using as architects and architecture students as well. And anyways, I think at the University of Nottingham and at Bartlett, at least in first year, they do encourage you to do your final projects in hand drawn. So it's part of the process. So yeah, more of the iterations, but I think I'd like to just hop on and see, you know, more thinking through drawing, like you say, Hamza. And then in terms of the actual drawing for the final piece, I suppose, once I kind of understood where I wanted the memories to appear within the apartment, it was a matter of representing it and kind of piecing the drawing together. I think in the context of the lockdown, this was done during that time. So access to the university and big plotters and big printers and, you know, the facilities that we would usually find at university, many of us weren't privy to them. So each kind of segment was drawn on A3 pieces of paper, simply because I had an A3 scanner at home. So then that made it easy in terms of transporting and moving from the paper to then splicing them onto a larger piece of paper or larger piece of canvas. So then in terms of the process, I'm just pencil and ruler, just as basic as you can be, I suppose.
So the actual kind of composition of such a drawing, I don't know if you've got a bigger view of this particular drawing. Um, uh, do you have one?
I do. It comes at the end
Okay,
in a couple
brilliant.
slides. In a couple slides. It's not.
Yeah, so even just before this stage, what, how do you come? Because I saw some kind of initial sketches where perhaps you were planning out the composition, right? And then when you get to this stage, are you kind of doing faint lines to make sure, okay, here's exactly what things are going, and then you start to kind of be more intentional with your marks?
Yeah, absolutely. So then it's I don't necessarily have it chronologically, but that's right. It's having an initial understanding of where the composition will end up towards, but also giving enough freedom for the mind to kind of just intuitively fill in the blanks, and then eventually, as the drawing progresses, it's in a ways it's more fascinating to not know the end goal and keep working towards something, because then that kind of invites some type of surprise or some types of impromptu discoveries, I suppose. So yeah.
Amazing.
um, so towards the end, I think I had about 30 pieces of A3 paper of individual drawings, which then fed into the drawing. And then I just scanned them in and then spliced them using Photoshop onto it's about A0. It's A0 size.
And how long is each A3 piece taking you approximately?
That's I think each A3 takes about a day, half a day maybe, for some where the technicality isn't so necessary. But then again, it's kind of like I would have a drawing and then I would then add to it maybe later. So then I kind of have this workflow of ongoing drawings, and then by the end I would have just the body of it and then fill in whatever I felt needed filling in. But it's interesting because it's, as you know, kind of how do you say, ensuring that you're keeping track of time for the deadline doesn't usually pan out that way. Oftentimes, I think it's double the time or triple the time. So there's kind of giving yourself enough leeway where creativity can take place while knowing that you can hit the deadline is something that's a difficult balance for sure.
I like the way you explain that. But one of the things you said, which is I think super super important, and it's something I've stressed as well to people who ask me questions to do a drawing. It's a strange thing to say to someone if you already know it, but if you didn't know it, it's sometimes a bit of a surprise to hear that actually it's not always best, and probably it's actually much better to spend kind of incremental time slots or amounts working on a particular drawing and thinking, well, actually, a really complex drawing, and now I feel like the way architectural pedagogical kind of expectations are going in university, big complex crazy drawings are expected nowadays, unfortunately. But so people feel the pressure to do kind of really really detailed drawings. But the advice that I think you mentioned, I want to kind of emphasize, is don't think that you have to spend a continuous amount of time on one drawing and you can't take a break, or you can't leave it and come back the next day or even a couple of days later. Because I feel like a lot of students fear the kind of, oh, if I leave this drawing, I won't be able to get back in my flow. What's your experience in that?
Absolutely, Hamza. I think more often than not, sorry, giving enough time to kind of think about the drawing, but then do the drawing, and then also giving enough time to let the drawing just simmer and kind of let it, let the idea or let the drawing kind of think and kind of step back is very important, because like you say, you get in the flow, you get absorbed into the drawing, but the problem is that when you feel like you're done, then the deadline is up, and then at that point you can't edit it at any point, and you haven't had that kind of distance to look at it objectively. So giving yourself enough time to step back and then look at the drawing and kind of, think about it is really an important part of drawing, I suppose.
Amazing.
So then I ended up with a lot of these sketches, interior views, plans, sections, and then kind of axos and everything. And then this is the final drawing where I think, it was about 30 individual pieces of A3 drawings came together. So then, when I looked in terms of the representation of it, it was this idea of looking at, Frank Lloyd Wright's drawings, how he used, composite drawings of plan, section, elevation, perspective, sometimes in one piece of paper. But also this idea of kind of representing what it actually, the essence of the memories and the flashbacks, happened. So the drawing itself kind of became an explanation for, the what I was looking at in terms of memories, but also kind of talking about just architectural orthographics, and kind of merging the two. So the poetic narrative is able to come through the drawing while talking about something that we as architecture students can grasp, which is the orthographics of a drawing.
This is an insane drawing, and just thinking about logistics when it comes to the course, how many final drawings are you submitting? And I guess what was the sort of requirements or the brief deadline, outcomes, or what did they expect from you? What were the hand-in kind of material for this kind of project? Because you're producing, probably multiple really, really large hand-drawn drawings, which I imagine the amount of hours that would have to be spent on this compared to its digital version would probably be, it'd probably be a lot more work and time and effort gone into this. So how did that affect your actual deadline and actual hand-in?
Right. So I think the deadline was, I think, in May 2020. So then that was a weird time for everyone, really, in the architectural, schooling, because everyone was kind of having to figure out how they would submit digitally, and present their work digitally for crits and for final presentations. So it was almost, because kind of the joy of going to architecture school is to be able to share and to be able to see these drawings. The final year exhibitions are big shows, right? Not only for yourself as a student to show your work, but also to really experience the work of everyone else within the school. So having everything be digital, albeit we have the online exhibitions, but still you couldn't really enjoy the complexity of everyone's projects. So in a ways, you kind of had to find this balance between trying to make something that you wanted, that you were proud of as a final piece of work for your final drawings, while kind of adhering to the deadlines and kind of weird conditions that we all are experiencing during the pandemic. And in terms of just the final drawings, it really depends on what your project is, I suppose. I'm sure it's different for different schools. And the fifth year does have a bit more liberty in what you show. But granted, I did show you just a small snippet of the actual drawing. The actual process work of drawing and the kind of other material that's needed to have the project be accredited by RIBA and ARB standards is also there. So it's trying to balance, what you want to do justice to the project. And for me, it was the drawing, while kind of adhering to the criteria that's set by the RIBA and ARB.
Yeah. Okay, I see. And very quickly on this drawing, I mean, in some of the kind of close-ups as well, perhaps one or two images previous, um, there's examples of what I was mentioning with your eraser technique. I'm sure that's not. I'm sure you didn't come up with that technique, but it was still fascinating to see, you know, to achieve this level of depth and tonality with your sketch. You know, it's an incredible technique to use the eraser as a drawing tool. Yeah, talk to us a little bit about that technique and how that also relates to the whole idea of actually making mistakes, because I'd be so scared to make a mistake.
Very true. I think it's. I suppose it's just really working with the material. It's in many ways it's just acknowledging and trying to understand your material best. Whether it may be pencil, whether it may be graphite, whether it may be digital means, and it's really just finding a balance of what to erase, what not to erase, to give a particular effect, but also to kind of blur this, the harshness of the lines and not. And kind of I suppose, the great strength of pencil is that you can have the harshest, gray or dark, almost to the point that it becomes really, like there's something hiding in the darkness, or it can just be as light as it just seems to fizzle out and to just blend out with the paper itself. So it's kind of working both ways and trying to work with the material. Yeah, I think it's I guess when you look at paintings by Turner, that kind of sfumato kind of thing going on, you get something similar, and just trying to reproduce that in the context of the pencil. So yeah, just trial and error, I guess.
Yeah, this is yeah, it's an incredible drawing. Please keep going, but I understand that I've definitely delayed you a lot. So you could probably like really fly through the other slides in your presentation, and I won't interrupt you, hopefully. And then we can look to summarize.
Sure, that sounds good, Hamza. So I'll just skip through. It's really just kind of different project and just different ways of using drawing. Um, this project, Pavilions for Conversation, was a project that I did the year before. So it's more rooted in this idea of kind of a building that would be built, because we have the design realization module, which is, exploring a project which could potentially be built, or striving for it to be built. And this kind of project is all about this idea of tea and conversation, creating kind of spaces which encourage debate and conversation through the tea ceremony. And I won't go too much into the project itself. Just wanted to show you different ways that I use drawing as a way of kind of designing the spaces, designing the interiors, designing the furniture as well. And just very quickly, because kind of drawing became a tool to not only communicate your own thoughts of this building and trying to understand the form and develop it, but also because we were meeting with environmental consultants and structural engineers. So then this is where the pencil and even just drawing by hand became paramount to even just communicating with others, to try and show your ideas, whether it's through written words, keywords, or if it's through rough sketches. So it's what I'm just trying to show here is how sketching and drawing can take two different forms, whether it's for a final exploratory drawing section like this one, or if it's for creating a detail or understanding the crux of kind of the craft of what we're trying to do to build these spaces. So I'm just flying through here, whether they're sections, whether they're kind of perspectives, views, and even from the development of a plan from a rough one to a more finalized version. And it's this idea of storytelling through the drawing, and not only illustrating a section or how it's constructed, but also telling the story of the poetics of the space. So this is kind of a quick run through of that one. And then these last two drawings, so these were done after the masters. So these are just personal projects of mine, and just a different way, and kind of just showing you the process of going from a rough sketch to then a final piece. But then also understanding what you want to create from a drawing, whether it's a small vignette of a potential of a space of going up through the stairs, and then going through a corridor, and then entering a room. It was more about the sequential planning and understanding of moving through an architectural drawing. So then, it's called Sohn's Lost Room because I was interested in this idea of what if Sohn were alive today, and what would he collect in our modernist architectural heritage? And this is reimagining the dwelling as part of that brief. And then finally, another one, which is Memory Palace, which this one took about 2-3 months of on and off kind of work. And it also starts off as a sketch, which then develops into something that's a bit more complex. But, kind of looking into a detail, it was a drawing that looks into this idea, also like apartment number 5, of just memory and exploration, and also kind of recording these phenomena into a larger piece of work. And so whether it's Louis Kahn's also in the IIM, and then a portion of Le Corbusier's rain spout here that appears here, or Doshi's, I think this was a light well into the spaces below in Doshi's Sangath. So I think that I'm trying to give you an overview of how drawing can be used, not only in terms of the final rendering of a drawing or the final working of a drawing, but also how drawing is important throughout the process of a university project, or just for your own personal works, and to kind of explore these spaces. And yeah, this is just a small snippet of this archive that we talked about, with Instagram, and this idea of showing and keeping track of all these drawings. And thank you for listening, and thank you for having me, Hamza.
God, thank you for going through this and giving us that kind of hidden insight. I can honestly say to you, I've been sitting here getting very excited and very inspired. And just to finish off, I like to ask the people who are featuring on these episodes, what advice you would give to students or young professionals who are trying to take their drawings to the next level, and perhaps with you, with your experience, what advice would you give to people who would love to kind of get into more hand drawing? We're so kind of attached to our devices and on our iPads. It'd be interesting to know what your thoughts are on using the iPads now that we have such sophisticated sketching softwares. But what would your advice be to students who really want to take on hand drawing a bit more seriously, but they don't feel fully confident in producing kind of strong drawings yet?
Absolutely. I think maybe two things. I think number one is for sure keep practicing, because the every mark you make, you get better. I suppose it's this idea of just continuous practice to then try to achieve something that you're proud of, something that you enjoy as well, that you enjoy drawing. And the pencil is the easiest medium, because you can erase it. It's always good to keep your mistakes, but the idea that the pencil is so versatile and so accessible to everyone, and paper is as well. And I think it's sometimes the crux of an idea starts off with the simplest mark, and then it's just a matter of keep working to keep working at it to then produce something, perhaps more substantial. And then second of all, I think it's really also about looking at drawings that really inspire you, because we live in such a visual culture nowadays, even through Instagram, that we see all of these drawings and all of these images quite fast. But seeing a drawing and really appreciating it is kind of part of then understanding what's possible with the material that you're using, whether it's a digital medium or whether it's an analog medium, whether it's the pencil. Kind of seeing works which inspire you but also encourage you to challenge yourself is the biggest thing. Not only drawings but also projects and people as well, for sure.
Amazing. And just you said something that I want to quickly get a bit more kind of explanation on. You said always keep your mistakes.
Yeah, I think this is also part of having this archive, is that whatever drawing you have, it might not be considered a mistake or not, but it's definitely a process towards something. It might be, a sketch that you did just on the fly, at the back of your notebook. But, whatever mark you have made just ends up becoming part of the process of trying to understand yourself and your skills. And that's why keeping an archive of the things that you have also for the future, to then see how much you've progressed, and also seeing, where the potential for your own, drawings to take you, for sure.
I think that's a powerful way to end this, with some amazing advice and perhaps something a little bit metaphorical and philosophical there about keeping your mistakes. Clement, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope we can continue to perhaps talk in the future and maybe do something else.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again, Hamza, for having me, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you. I can already tell, you're going to go very, 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 very far in this field, and I hope we stay connected, and I hope we can keep doing stuff that helps people and gives people value. Just to finish off, where can people find your work, your website, or what have you got going on?
Yeah. Thanks for asking, Hamza. So in addition to my Instagram, so it's Clement Luk Laurencio, there's also the website if anyone's curious to see other works, other older works as well, clementlukLaurencio.com, kind of continuing drawing practice, but also having a foot in academia. I'm also an external design critic, and I also tutor at the University of Nottingham, and also trying to keep busy with all these, furthering my drawing practice. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, and take care.
Thank you, Hamza. You too.